My grandfather was kind to everyone, but when we got home, his kindness turned to meanness. My name is Margaret Lynn. I'm 81 years old, and I'm from Wheeling, West Virginia, one of those little towns where everyone knows everyone, or thinks they do. And if you've come here, please like me. Every like is like a hug for this old lady. My grandfather, Mr. Charles Thompson, was the kind of man who knew the name of every voter's dog. He won elections with people shouting his name in the street. Teachers smiled when he passed by. The nuns said he was sent from God. And me, I was the little granddaughter he made a point of showing off at the town hall parties. "This is Margaret," he would say, squeezing my shoulder with a strength that warned me not to breathe wrongly. My mother, poor thing, never had much of a voice. She married young, separated quickly, returned to her parents' house with a daughter on her lap, and her pride shattered. My grandmother was the typical American politician's wife. She wore makeup, smiled, and pretended not to see anything. In fact, pretending was the favorite sport in that house. Everyone pretended something different. My mother pretended not to see when I was shaking. My grandmother pretended that everything was normal, and I pretended to sleep. The first time I woke up with him in the room, I thought I was dreaming. He said he was there just to see if I was all right. "Grandpa cares about you, my little angel," he said in a soft voice, like someone cradling a baby. And I didn't understand, but I felt it. I felt in my stomach that something was wrong. I felt that tension in my body that only those who have been through it know what I'm talking about. The next day, he took me out for ice cream and told me not to tell anyone. "It's our secret, okay, sweetie? If you tell, Mommy will be sad and Grandma will fight with you." And there I learned, it's always our fault. We grow up thinking that we did something wrong, that we provoked, that we didn't behave. I was 9 people. 9. But of course, in the city, Grandpa was the hero. He had a street name, he had a portrait in school. People knelt down to ask for his blessing when he appeared at Mass. I was just the little granddaughter who smiled at the corner of his mouth, who avoided looking him in the eye, and who pretended to have a headache so he wouldn't come down at dinner time. I started to close myself off. At school, I didn't answer calls properly anymore. I'd hide in the bathroom at break time. There was one teacher, Miss Harper, who tried to strike up a conversation. She'd say, "Margaret, are you all right at home?" And I gave her that smile that children learn early. The "everything's fine, yes ma'am" smile, even when everything inside us is screaming for help. Only nobody listened, or pretended not to, which is almost worse. Time went by and his visits to my room became part of the routine. Sometimes he'd show up with a different excuse, a new toy, a doll, a story to tell. He would sit on the edge of the bed, smooth my hair, and say things that made me want to disappear. My mother? All she said was that I should be more grateful. "You have everything here, Margaret. You have a bed, you have food, you have a nice house. Some people would give their lives to have half of that." I listened quietly, because I'd already learned that talking only made things worse. One of those nights, I remember pretending to have a fever. I covered myself up to my neck, sweated with the blanket, even in the heat, just so she'd let me sleep on the sofa in the living room. And didn't it work? She thought I was ill and left me there, wrapped up in the comforter, while he stood in the doorway watching me for a while, like someone who chooses the best moment to strike. But that night, he didn't come. It was the first time I felt a thread of victory, a tiny thread that lasted until the next day. Because at breakfast, he looked at me with those eyes that already knew I was trying to escape. "You're not going to fool me, sweetie. You never will." That day, I tasted blood in my mouth, even though I wasn't hurt. It was the taste of fear mixed with an anger I didn't even know existed. And then, my goodness, something different began to grow inside me. It wasn't courage yet. It was just the beginning. An uncomfortable feeling, like when you feel a splinter in your finger and you can't get it out, but you know it's there. And that's when the story really begins. If you've made it this far, leave a like, dear. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt that kind of silence that screams inside. You know that feeling when someone looks at you in a way that makes you want to disappear? That's how I began to notice that my grandfather was changing. He still came into my room, still ran his hand through my hair, saying that it was for me to relax. But now he looked different, as if he was evaluating, like someone measuring the shelf life of ripe fruit. That summer, I turned 10. My mother prepared a simple cake, put some crooked bladders on the kitchen wall, and invited only the neighbor with her daughter. Everything was improvised. My grandfather arrived in the late afternoon with a gift package and a smile that made my skin crawl. He pulled me aside and said very quietly, too close to my ear, "Now you're becoming a young lady. You're getting more and more beautiful." It gave me a knot in my stomach. I wasn't even sure what young lady meant, but I realized that from then on, things were going to change, and not for the better. He gave me an expensive doll, the kind you only saw in store windows downtown. But when I opened it, all I could think was that that doll would never protect me. No toy could. That night, he didn't come to my room, and for a moment, I thought that maybe it was over. Maybe, by some miracle, he'd lost interest. Silly illusion. The next day, after breakfast, he called me to help out in the shed at the back of the house. He said he needed me to hold some tools while he moved some old boxes from the town hall. My mother thought it was nice. "Look at her helping her grandfather," she said, her eyes full of crooked pride. In the shed, the air was stuffy and the smell of mold mixed with grease made me want to run. He started talking about politics, how hard it was to be mayor, the responsibility he had on his back. And there I was, holding a wrench, trying not to shiver. "You know, Margaret, there are things you can't tell anyone, because people wouldn't understand. They judge." "Yes, sir," I replied, as I always did. He came closer and put his hand on my shoulder. He squeezed slowly, then harder. "But you understand, Grandpa, don't you? You're special. You know that Grandpa loves you." That's when I knew that what he was doing in the bedroom was going to start happening in other places too. The bedroom was no longer the only dangerous place in the house. After that day, everything became a game of escape. I started inventing stomach aches, stuffing things in the cupboard so he couldn't sit on my bed, sleeping with the door locked when he could. And even then, he found a way to get to me. He surrounded me with words, gifts, and glances that no one else noticed, or pretended not to. My grandmother, for example, became an expert at averting her eyes. Once he called me in front of the school. I was in his car, that black Ford he used to parade around town. He said he was going to take me home because my mother had asked him to. I got in because in those days we obeyed adults without thinking twice. On the way, he stopped at a place I didn't know, an empty field with some dry trees around it. "I just came to show you a beautiful place. It's between us, okay?" I stood still, trying not to show fear. He got out of the car, opened the door next to me, and said, "Come and see how beautiful this sunset is." I got out, but I stood there by the door with my hand on the handle, and it was there, in that open field, that he tried to do those things again. I'm not going to tell you exactly what, darling, but you can imagine. And do you know what saved me? The sound of a car passing in the distance. He stopped, looked at me seriously, and said, "There are people who would give anything to be in your shoes. There are children who don't even have a home. You should be grateful." That went on in my head for days, and I began to wonder if maybe he was right. Children believe everything, don't they? And when everyone pretends that it's love, you start to think that we're the problem, that it's us who need to change, that maybe if I was quieter, more obedient, smiled more, he'd stop. But he wouldn't stop, and the visits to my room became routine, and I gradually stopped being a child. My friends talked about toys, outings, and TV shows. I was busy trying to survive in silence, until one of those nights I heard my mother crying. It was rare. She was dry, tough, one of those who learned to take everything in her stride. But that night, she cried. I stood at the door of her room, not daring to knock, and I heard her say, to no one, "If I had the courage, we'd disappear from this place." It was the first time I realized that maybe she knew. The next day I looked at her differently, but she was the same again. She told me to make the bed, comb my hair, and smile at Grandpa. And I did, because in that house, no one wanted to see what hurt. What about me? I was still just a little girl, but inside me, something was changing. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew that one day it was going to make a noise. It was supposed to be a beautiful ceremony, one of those that decorates the main square with flags, balloons, a politician's speech, and a marching band playing those songs that no one listens to properly, only pretends to like. The town was celebrating the anniversary of Wheeling's founding, 100 and some years of history, tradition, and, according to the local newspaper, a community of unwavering values. Nice on paper. But paper can take anything, right? My grandfather, as always, was the star. He wore a starched beige suit, a trained smile, and that look that everyone mistook for kindness. He knew how to behave, what to say, how to walk, where to put his hand on the First Lady's waist, and when to hold mine. Yes, because that year he decided that I would be the girl symbol of hope, a sort of mascot to thrill those present. My beautiful granddaughter, an example of purity and family values, he said in the newspaper with a photo of us on the balcony of the house, him holding my hand and me trying not to tremble. A few days before the ceremony, he started with that sweet, poisonous talk. He said I had to look beautiful, impeccable, because everyone would be watching. He had a white lace dress made, ordered by a seamstress in the neighboring town. The dress arrived in a box with a pink bow, and my mother was delighted. "Now you're going to look like a princess," she said, fixing the bow in my hair. She saw it as an honor. I saw it as punishment. The night before the event, he came to my room, as he always did when he wanted to leave a message without witnesses. He leaned against the edge of the bed and looked at me with a calmness that gave me chills. "Tomorrow you'll smile, you know. Everyone will be watching. You'll be representing our name. And I don't want to see that scared look on your face, understand?" I nodded, not having the courage to speak. He held my chin, forcing my face up. "Yes, show that little smile, just like the one in the photo. You know how to smile, don't you?" I turned my face away, not because I had the courage, but because my body did it all by itself. And he noticed. He squeezed my arm hard, so hard that the mark remained until the ceremony. If you do something wrong, it'll be worse later, much worse. Understand? I understood. I understood that this would be another day when I would have to play the role of the perfect granddaughter, the one everyone loves, the one nobody hears cry. On the day of the ceremony, the square was packed. Children in uniform, people with flags, church ladies lined up on the benches. The stage was set up with a banner reading, "Pride and Tradition Wheeling Forever." They called me up right after the girls' choir. "With you, little Margaret Lynn Thompson, our representative of hope, granddaughter of our beloved Mayor Charles Thompson." The applause was loud. I stood there at the edge of the stage, holding the microphone with sweaty hands. Behind me, he smiled with his mouth, but his eyes controlled me. I knew that any trembling on my part could be charged later, in the dead of night. I began to read the paper that he himself had told me to memorize. "Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to represent the children of our city." My voice faltered, but I kept going. I concentrated on my breathing, on the letters, on not looking at him. With each pause, more applause. But the sound of the applause seemed distant. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. Sweat dripped down my back. When I finished, I smiled, that rehearsed smile that doesn't even touch your eye. He came over to me, took my hand, and lifted me up as if I were a trophy. "This girl is the future of Wheeling," he shouted. The crowd shouted along, and I just thought I wanted to disappear, that if the ground opened up, I'd jump without looking. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the town hall. Sweets, soft drinks, people complimenting my dress, asking about the school, pulling my hair affectionately. He carried me around as if I were part of the decoration. "Look how much she's grown," they said. "She's got to follow in her grandfather's footsteps, huh?" They laughed, and I laughed too, because it was either that or punishment. When it was all over, and the guests began to leave. My mother stayed to help tidy up with the staff. My grandmother disappeared, as she always did when she got tired. And he called me into his office. He said he needed to say thank you. I knew what that meant. But at that moment, something inside me burst. I stopped at the door. I looked at him with an anger I'd never felt before. My hands were shaking, but I didn't take a step. "Come in," he said, already impatient. "No, don't." He froze. I didn't expect him to. "What?" I said no. I said no. He looked at me for long seconds. I felt like I was going to be beaten, or worse. But he just came closer, lowered his voice, and said in my ear, "You don't know what you're doing." I replied, almost inaudibly, "Yes, I know. I'm trying to get out of this alive." He didn't insist. He smiled and said, "Let's see how long you can take it." That night, I didn't go to my room. I slept in the bathroom, with the door locked and my body curled up on the carpet. It was the worst night of my life, but it was also the first time he couldn't touch me. That's when I decided I had to do something. That house was a trap, and no one was going to get me out, only myself. I began to observe, listening, gathering small details that could perhaps become a way out. Because to escape from a powerful man, my dear, you need more than courage. You need a plan. And even though I was just a little girl, I started to put mine together. After that ceremony in the square, something in me turned to stone. I woke up, ate, went to school, and came back as usual. But inside, it was like I was hollow. Only silence lived there. And within that silence, a decision was made. I was going to understand how to get out of that prison. It was no longer a loose idea. It was a plan. Half fear, half instinct. I began to observe every detail. The way he locked the doors, the sound of footsteps, the timetable of the house. It wasn't play anymore. It was survival. The frightened girl who shivered at the sound of the doorknob was now counting how many minutes he took in the shower. She wrote it all down in her head, because one day when the chance came, I couldn't miss it. It happened on a Saturday in the fall. My mother had gone out with my grandmother to visit a sick aunt in Pittsburgh. I stayed because I had the flu, a lie she easily swallowed. I only coughed twice, forced a fever with a heavy blanket, and that was it. I got rid of the trip, but I didn't want to rest. I wanted to search. I knew he'd be gone all day sorting out things at the town hall, and when he went out, he left the house in the care of the female employees who stayed downstairs gossiping or watching soap operas. The upstairs was mine alone. I went into his office. It was the first time I'd done this with intention. Before, I'd just run past. But that day, my heart was pounding like a war drum. The walls seemed to stare at me. The carpet creaked slightly, as if it were whispering, "Are you sure, miss?" The table was spotless. Everything was lined up. Folders, papers, an old globe, and that smell of leather mixed with unlit cigarettes. I went straight to the drawers. The first only had a pen, a stamp, and an envelope. The second, a folder with bills from the town hall. The third, locked. I thought about giving up, but something pushed me. I went to the closet next to the window. Inside, among suits and jackets hanging discreetly, was a key, the same one he used whenever he needed to store important documents. I went back and slipped it into the hole in the drawer. It turned easily. The click of the latch chilled me to the bone. Inside, I found a pile of yellowed envelopes, old photos, newspaper clippings, notes, and at the bottom, a notebook, small, leather-bound. I opened it slowly. The first few pages were political notes, contacts, dates, favors. But as I leafed through it, I realized that it wasn't just a mayor's diary. It was something else, a kind of diary. There was no name, no exact date, but there were too many details. There, he described meetings, intimate situations. He used codes, but I understood. Some sentences were too clear. He visited the little one's room again. She's more obedient. Mom seems suspicious. I need to be more careful. She doesn't cry so much anymore. She's more accepting. My blood ran cold. I felt the nausea rise to my throat, and there, in that instant, I knew for sure. He knew what he was doing. It wasn't impulse, it wasn't madness, it was method, it was addiction, it was planned cruelty. I began to tremble. My hands were sweating so much that I almost dropped my notebook, but I took a deep breath. I knew this could be my way out. I kept the information. I memorized the details. I put everything back with the care of a surgeon. I closed the drawer, hung the key on the same hook. I left the office as if nothing had happened. That evening, when he arrived, he looked at me suspiciously. "Alone all day, sweetie?" I nodded. "Did you do something wrong?" "No, sir." He analyzed me. He sensed something, but he didn't say anything else. He just went to his room as if he was thinking. I, lying on my bed with the sheet covering my nose, could only think, he's afraid. He keeps proof of his own filth, and that could turn against him one day. Over the next few days, I began to think of a way to get that notebook out of there. It couldn't be done all at once. It couldn't arouse suspicion. But if I could, maybe, just maybe, I could show it to someone and not be called crazy. But nothing is simple, right? It was that same week that he started acting differently, colder, fewer words. He stopped calling me sweetie. Now it was just you. "Where are you going? What time did you get back? Why are you so quiet?" It sniffed out change, and even though I tried to disguise it, I couldn't hide how the notebook made me feel. I couldn't look at it anymore without seeing the whole monster, and that's when my mother started to notice. One evening, while we were having dinner, she put down her fork and looked at me. "Margaret, why do you shiver every time he comes into the room?" I didn't answer. I swallowed. My grandfather pretended not to hear, but stopped chewing. She insisted, "Talk to me, child. Is it something?" I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I couldn't. Not there. Not with him sitting 2 steps away. So I lied. "It's just the flu. I'm still weak." She stared at me. Maybe she understood. Maybe she decided to pretend a little longer. But one thing was clear to me. The tables were turning. Slowly, but surely. After discovering that damn notebook, my mind never had a second's peace. I'd wake up with the smell of ink still in my memory. I'd go to sleep with the sentences hammering behind my eyes. I couldn't look at it anymore without feeling a mixture of hatred and dread. But I couldn't act on impulse either. If he found out that I knew, I don't even like to imagine what would have happened. I waited a whole week. Every day felt like a year. I kept an eye on his movements like a snake in the bush. One slip and you're on your way. I noticed that on Wednesdays, he always left early for a meeting with some counselors from the Capitol. On those afternoons, it took him at least 2 hours longer to get back. It was my chance, but I would only get one. The following Wednesday, I feigned a stomach ache. I didn't go to school. My mother left a bowl of soup in my room and said she'd be back by lunchtime. The house was empty before noon. The staff went out to buy groceries, and I was alone with the silence. Only this time, silence was my ally. I ran to the office. My fingers were shaking so badly that it took me almost 10 minutes to turn the key in the drawer. When I did, I pulled out the notebook like it was a bomb. I didn't know where to hide it. My initial plan was just to read some more, to confirm that what I'd seen the other time wasn't a hallucination in my tortured head. But when I opened it, oh dear, it was all there. Names, dates, times, details, my name, my reactions. He described me as if he owned me, as if I were part of the furniture in the house. And it wasn't just about me. There were others, neighbors, a distant cousin, a new employee who only lasted 3 weeks. He wrote like someone telling a story, like someone who laughs inside. I read it and almost threw up on the carpet. It was as if the notebook had a life of its own, and each word was slowly hanging me. I closed it. I needed to hide it. I looked around, and the only idea I had was the attic hatch. No one had been up there for years. I pushed over a chair, climbed up with difficulty, opened the compartment, and threw the notebook into an old box of Christmas decorations. I covered it with old rags, forgotten rags. I almost twisted my foot on the way down, but it worked. I got down and went back to my room as if nothing had happened. At dinner time, he arrived earlier than usual. My heart almost stopped when I heard the front door slam. His face was red, sweat dripping down the back of his neck. He slammed his briefcase on the table and shouted, "Someone's gone through my things!" My mother ran in, frightened. "What is it, Charles?" "There was paper out of place, an open drawer. This isn't a kid's house." I kept quiet. I looked at my plate. I pretended to chew. He gave me a look, one of those piercing ones. "You stayed at home, didn't you?" My mother answered for me. "She was in bed. She didn't even leave the room." He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. That exchange of glances said it all. He was suspicious. He knew. He just didn't have proof. Yet. That night, I locked the door with the chest of drawers against it. I slept in pieces, my heart beating harder than a trapped bird's wings. I woke up several times thinking he was there, but he didn't come. I think he was waiting, watching, like a predator that has already smelled the escape. Over the next few days, he changed, calmer, more gentle. He started bringing gifts for no reason. Chocolate, hair bows, a gold bracelet. For my angel, a treat. It was theater, an attempt to win me back, but I was no longer the silly little granddaughter. I knew it was his way of controlling, distracting, and confusing me. But inside, I was cracking up. Because now I had the test, yes. I had a notebook full of horrors stored in the attic. But what was I going to do with it? Who was going to believe it? The mayor? The father of the city? The one who prayed loudly at Sunday Mass? I tried to tell my mother. One night, I sat at the foot of her bed and remained silent for a few minutes. She was removing her nail polish, oblivious. "Mom, if I showed you something, would you believe me?" She stopped. She looked at me. "What thing, Margaret?" I hesitated. My mouth was dry, my throat tight. "Something Grandpa writes. Some wrong things." She went back to her cotton. "Your imagination has always been very vivid. Tell me what you've been up to." I got up and left. I couldn't. She wouldn't listen. Not yet. I went back to my room, certain that the path was mine alone. And if it was mine alone, I needed a new plan. That's when I thought of school. Ms. Edith, the English teacher. She was new in town from Chicago, different from the others. She looked you in the eye. She wasn't afraid of anyone. She'd called me a few times to talk, saying that I seemed sad, withdrawn. Maybe she listened. Maybe she saw. The next day, I took a piece of the notebook, just one page, hidden at the bottom of my backpack. I spent the whole day with my stomach in knots. When it was time to leave, I waited for the room to empty. I approached her desk, hands shaking. "Minus Miss Edith. Can I show you something?" She looked at me carefully. "Of course, dear. What is it?" And there, my dear, there I delivered the first spark of my truth. I still didn't know if it was going to spark hope or fire. If you felt this way with me, leave a like, see. What I'm digging up here still hurts. But now that I've started, there's no turning back. When Miss Edith finished reading that paper, she didn't say anything. The room was already empty, just the sound of chairs being dragged down the corridors. She held the paper like someone who holds broken glass, with care and fear at the same time. I stood there, waiting for the verdict. Is this serious? Or are you sure it was him? But nothing came out of her mouth for the first few minutes. She just breathed heavily and looked at me like someone trying to put together pieces of a puzzle she never imagined existed. "Margaret," she began, her voice choking. "This. Did you write it?" I shook my head slowly. "No, ma'am. It's his. My grandfather's." Her eyes lit up, not with emotion, but with shock, of anger, of disbelief. "And why are you showing me this now?" I shrugged, because I don't know where else to run. She didn't answer. She got up slowly, went to the door and locked it. She came back and sat down next to me. She reached out and took my hand. It was the first time I felt an adult touch that didn't hurt. It was firm, warm, safe. Listen to me, Margaret. This is serious. Very serious. And if it's true, we need to do something. At that moment, my heart beat faster. Someone had believed it. Someone had seen it. Someone understood that it wasn't an exaggeration, an invention, a drama. I almost cried, but I held it in. For me, crying has always been synonymous with punishment. I've learned to hold back tears like someone hides a knife. She continued, "Do you have any more of these? More pages?" I nodded. "It's hidden at home, in the attic." "Can you bring it?" "I might be able to, but if he gets suspicious..." She took a deep breath. She thought. Then she said, "Let's take it easy. But, Margaret, we can't leave it at that. I left school with one less weight, but another one coming on. Now I had an ally, but I also had a responsibility. What would happen if she went to the police? What if they did nothing? What if they told him?" That night, my head was spinning. I pretended to have an earache so I wouldn't have to go downstairs for dinner. My mother knocked on the door and insisted, but I just said I was dizzy. She gave up in the end. In the darkness of the bedroom, I heard footsteps in the corridor. I knew it was him. He stopped in front of the door. He stood there. His silence was worse than a scream, heavier than any threat. And then he left. The next day, I woke up early. I went to school with my heart leaping out of my throat. Ms. Edith was waiting for me by the water fountain. She didn't say anything. She just handed me an envelope, a woman's address. She works with girls like you. She's trustworthy. I kept it without reading it. I didn't even want to know her name. I just wanted a chance. But in this world, when you start to move the right pieces, the board turns. That weekend, he had a fit of rage. My grandmother left the coarse salt on the table. He stormed off, slammed his hand on the wood so hard that the glass fell. He shouted, offended. Then he locked himself in his office. Something clicked in me. Maybe he had smelled danger. On Sunday night, I went to get the notebook. I waited for everyone to go to sleep. I went up to the attic with the flashlight hidden in my pajama pocket. The box was still there, just as I'd left it. I took the notebook, wrapped it in an old sweater, and stuffed it in my school bag. I went back to my room with my heart racing. On Monday morning, I arrived earlier than usual. I handed the entire notebook to Ms. Edith. She could hardly disguise her panic when she saw the contents. "This is enough to knock him over, but Margaret, you need to understand what will happen if we go ahead." I nodded. I knew, or I thought I did. She looked me in the eye, took my hand again. "I'm with you, no matter what he tries. Now you're not alone anymore." I stood there with my backpack empty and my chest full of things. I was afraid, of course, but I was more than that. I was angry. I had the urge to shout everything into a microphone in the middle of the square, where he had made me a doll. I thirsted for justice, even though I didn't even know what that would be like for a girl like me. That day, I came home different, more attentive. He looked at me suspiciously. He pretended to read the newspaper, but his eyes followed my every move. He was plotting. I could feel it. And when men like that start to get suspicious, it's only a matter of time before they do something to silence them. And it didn't take long. 2 days later, Miss Edith disappeared. They said the school had received a letter from her resigning. She was going to take care of her sick mother in another state. The principal told her with that fake tone of someone who already knew the whole story. My world fell apart. She was gone, and the notebook was with her. I went home in shock. He smiled at dinner. He served more mashed potatoes on my plate. He toasted with soda. It's so nice when things work out, isn't it, sweetie? I had to swallow my food without chewing. My stomach felt like stone. That night, I looked up at the ceiling and understood. He'd pulled the strings. He made her leave. He used his contacts. He buried my truth before she could even breathe. But what he didn't know was that I had made a copy. The night I learned of Miss Edith's departure, something inside me went out. I didn't cry, scream, or break anything, but my chest felt hollow, as if someone had emptied my breath with a poisonous blast. I knew what had happened. He had made her disappear. She was too much of a threat to the castle he had built with a brick of lies and a smile of a photograph. I woke up the next day with a heavy body but a boiling head. I couldn't count on anyone else. It was me for me. But he didn't know everything either, because a few days before I handed my notebook to the teacher, I'd already copied a few pages, by hand, slowly, in small handwriting, each line written at dawn, afraid of any creaks in the house. I kept it in a brown envelope and stuffed it inside the cover of an old math book that was at the bottom of the bookcase in my room. At the time, I didn't even know why I was doing it. It was just instinct, something telling me, if he takes away your chance, you still have a piece of the truth. With the teacher gone, the notebook gone, and my soul in tatters, all that was left was this copy. And it was with it that I began to draw the next step. I couldn't show it to my mother or any of my neighbors. They all fawned over him like he was a saint. I didn't have a relative in another city or a friend who could keep it for me, but I knew a place, one that nobody touched, nobody remembered. The mailbox of the abandoned school in the back street. The building had been empty since the new school was built, and I'd seen people from the neighborhood throwing old paper in there, like a forgotten deposit. I took the copy, folded it in 4, stuffed it in a new envelope and wrote, "If anything happens to me, read this. It's about the mayor." No name, no signature, but with too much truth between those lines. I put it in the box with my heart racing. I left it there and ran away like someone dropping a bomb. From then on, I started pretending more. I woke up, combed my hair, said good morning. I answered everything he asked in a sweet voice, with a low gaze and a calm manner. He believed me. He started acting like he used to. He called me my girl, offered me chocolate after dinner, but I could see it. He was tense. Every time the phone rang, he froze. He read the newspaper more intently, like someone looking for signs of something about to explode. And it did. Not as I expected, but it exploded. On Friday of the following week, I was called in by the school principal. Her manner was dry, it always was, but that day she was tougher than usual. She made me sit down, looked at me for long seconds. "Margaret, your teacher." She left a note before she left. She asked us to pay attention to you, that you might be in danger. I froze. I didn't know what to say. I looked at the floor. "Are you?" she asked. I shook my head. She took a deep breath. "We need to know the truth, young lady. If there's something wrong at home, you need to tell us." But I didn't. I froze again. Fear paralyzed me. If I opened my mouth, he could find out. He could do worse. I went home with a bitter mouth. I thought maybe I'd missed my only chance of help, but that very night, he made it clear who he was. We ate dinner in silence. My mother praised the soup. My grandmother knitted. He, with that good man look, served more potatoes on my plate. When he'd finished, he ordered me to accompany him to the yard. He said he needed help with the water tank. I thought that was strange. He never asked for that, so I went. When he got there, he leaned against the gate with his arms crossed. He looked me up and down as he did on dark nights. "Do you think you can fool me, miss?" I didn't answer. My hands were sweating. "Do you think I don't know? That you didn't leave something lying around? A copy, perhaps?" I pretended not to understand. "I just want to study." He laughed, a dry, toothless laugh. "If you carry on, I'll end it all. Do you understand?" I tried to leave. He held my arm tightly. "You're just a little girl. Nobody believes in little girls." I let go with a jerk. I ran into the bedroom. I locked the door. I sat on the floor with my body shaking. But I didn't cry. I was too old for tears. There, I decided that I couldn't wait for someone to do something for me. Either I spoke or I was swallowed up. On Monday, after school, I went to the mailbox at the old school. The envelope was still there. But now I had added a new piece of paper. I wrote calmly, "He threatened me." If anything happens, it wasn't an accident. I folded it, closed it, and left it there. My hand was still shaking. On the way home, I passed the police station. I looked at it. I almost went in, but I stopped on the step. A policeman known to my grandfather came out. He greeted a lady with a broad smile, just like his. I went back to the sidewalk. It wasn't time yet, but he was coming. I thought I'd done everything right, that I'd left the note in the most forgotten place in town, that no one would touch it for weeks, but I was wrong. And it was this mistake that set fire to the rope that held my life together. That week, someone from the town hall decided to clean up the old school. They were going to renovate it, turn it into a community center or whatever. All I know is that they went through the storeroom, opened the mailbox, found an envelope with no sender, and crooked letters saying that the mayor was hiding horrors between the walls of his own house. The news flew, but not in the way I needed. The next day, my mother came into the room like a hurricane. "What's all this about, Margaret?" she shouted, throwing a crumpled piece of paper on my bed. It was a copy of the complaint, folded, dirty, but with my handwriting there, clear. I froze. I tried to get up. She pushed me back. "Did you write that?" I didn't know whether to lie, run away, or ask for help. I just stared. "Answer me, girl. Are you accusing your own grandfather? Do you realize what that means?" I wanted to shout, "Yes, he did things to me that don't even have words." But my mouth stopped, as always. My grandfather appeared at the door, calm, tidy, as if it was just another ordinary afternoon. "Let me sort it out with her, Clara. You can go." My mother snorted, looked at me with eyes full of anger and disappointment, and left. He closed the door. He sat down in the chair, stared at me. I knew it would come to this. "You've always been rebellious, but accusing me? Tarnish my name?" I cowered in the corner of the bed. He didn't shout. He spoke softly, cold, as if he were a court judge. "Do you have any idea what you've caused?" I shook my head, not knowing if he was going to hit me, drag me away, or smile. "Listen to me," he continued. "I can end your life, your mother's, anyone who tries to touch this subject." For the first time, I answered firmly, "I'm not a child anymore." He approached me slowly as if he didn't believe I had spoken. "What?" "You heard me." He stopped. He took a deep breath. Then he stood up. "So let's see if your courage lasts to the end." That night, the house became a graveyard. No one spoke. No one ate dinner. My mother locked herself in her room. My grandmother pretending not to see. And me? I stayed awake. Because now I wasn't just a girl trying to escape. I was a real threat, a piece out of his control. The next day, things got worse. At school, everyone was whispering. They looked at me as if I had committed a crime. It was her, they said, the mayor's granddaughter. They say she made things up. And so, little by little, I became the stranger, the liar, the problematic one. But not everyone thought so. A school official, the janitor, Mr. Williams, a quiet man who cleaned the classrooms in the late afternoon, called me out in the corridor. "Did you write that paper?" It took me a while to answer. He didn't smile or try to be nice. He just looked, waiting. "Yes," I said softly. He nodded. "I read it. I don't know what's going on, but if it's true, you need to get out of this house." Those words took me by surprise. "Why do you believe me?" He straightened his cap, looked at the floor, then at me again. "Because I was a child too. That was it. And that was all." That day, he handed me a number, written down on a piece of paper. "Call this place. Tell them Williams sent you. They help girls. Like you." I took the paper home like a diamond in my pocket. I hid it in the pillowcase. I planned to call the next day from school. But my grandfather was smarter. The next day, he showed up early. He told me not to go to school. He said he was taking me on a family trip. Something quick, just the two of us. "Let's take a breather," he said. "I need you to trust me." I refused. I said I had a test. I made up a fever, nausea, whatever I could, but he wouldn't accept it. "Either you get in the car or things are going to get a lot worse for your mother." There, I understood what he was doing. Driving me away. Silencing me. Forever, if necessary. I went to the bathroom. I locked the door. I took the paper from Mr. Williams. I tore off a piece. I wrote, "If I disappear, he did it. Mayor Charles Thompson." He took me by force. I hid it in the sole of my shoe. I sewed it on with thick thread, trembling. It was my last cry. I went back to the living room. I got into the car. And as it drove down the road, I could only think of one thing. Either I go back, or this is the end. I woke up to the light coming through the bedroom window. He was ready with the car key in his hand and a smile that chills you to the bone. He said his suitcase was packed. that the trip was short, a weekend to reflect and rest. But it wasn't an invitation. It was an order. I went downstairs with soft knees. My mother was in the kitchen, staring at the stove like someone who sees the end of the world at the bottom of the pan. She didn't even look at me. She just said, quietly, "Come back soon, Margaret." That hurt me more than any slap. We got into the car, the same black car he used to parade around town. Now it was my coffin on wheels. He drove slowly, eyes fixed on the road, cemetery silence between us. Every now and then, he'd drop a sentence, like someone testing the air. It's sad when your family turns against you. You had everything, and you wanted to spit it out. An ungrateful girl is worse than a servant snake. I didn't reply. I just held on tight to the note sewn into my shoe as if it were an anchor. I knew that if he found out, I wouldn't leave. After almost 2 hours, we left the main road. We took a dirt track, trees closing in overhead, high bushes on both sides. It was a place I didn't know, and he knew it. He stopped the car near a dry stream. He opened the door and said, "Get down." I remained motionless. He came up to me, tugged on my arm. "Come on, Margaret, take a breather." I obeyed, not because I wanted to, because fear told me to. We stood there in silence. The wind blew dry leaves. He leaned against a tree trunk and crossed his arms. "You know, when I was a boy, we used to bury our problems like this, somewhere far away, where no one could find it." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You've become a problem. You and your mania for appearing." I didn't look at him. My heart was beating too fast. If he did anything in there, no one would even find my clothes. "But I still like you," he said. "I can still pretend that nothing happened. Protect you. As long as you pretend, too, that you forget." I turned on my side. I stared at the floor. He came closer. He touched my shoulder. That touch I knew too well. And there, my goodness, there I exploded. I pushed hard, not out of courage, but out of instinct. He stumbled, fell sideways. He was surprised. I never imagined he was so fragile. "Do you think you still have power?" I shouted. "The city may be yours, but my soul isn't anymore." He got up slowly. He didn't come up. He just looked at me. "You'll regret this. No one will believe you. I'm the mayor. You're just a lying girl." And that's when I replied, "I've already left a note. I've already told you. You already know. You can kill me, but you can't erase what's already come out." For the first time, I saw fear on his face. He got into the car. He ordered me to get in. We drove back in silence. He didn't touch me anymore. He didn't say a word. And I just thought that if I got out of there alive, I'd never shut up again. When he got home, he told me he'd had a disagreement with me. I'd better stay in my room for a few days to clear my head. My mother didn't ask. She just nodded. But I knew now he was cornered, and when men like him feel threatened, they do stupid things. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed a backpack. I took the copies, the paper with Mr. Williams' number, and some hidden food. I planned everything. The next day, I would run away, to the police station, to the press, to the world, wherever I could be heard. But I didn't need to, because that morning, the city exploded with the news that no one expected. The school janitor, the same one who helped me, turned up dead. They said it was an accident. He fell off a ladder. But anyone who knows the game knows it was an errand. I cried with rage, of impotence, but also of fury, because now it wasn't just about me. Mr. Williams' death fell like a stone on my chest. It wasn't just the loss, no. It was the warning that came with it. The message was clear, even if no one said it. He who helps the girl falls. It tore me up inside, because I knew that his blood was mine too, that he died trying to do what no one else had the courage to do, and that now either I did something or I was next on the list. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, waiting for any noise at the door, but it didn't come. Maybe he thought I'd shut up. That fear would bend me over again. But there, my dear, there another Margaret was born. The next morning I went to school, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Every corridor was a minefield. Classmates whispered, teachers avoided my gaze, and the worst, the principal called me into her office. "Margaret, we need to talk about these allegations." I sat with my body shaking, but my voice firm. "It's all true." She sniffled. She was uncomfortable. "These are serious accusations, young lady, against a respected figure. It doesn't matter how many medals he has on his chest. I know what I've lived through." She looked at me for long seconds. Then she got up and walked to the window. "The police want to talk to you, only with your mother along." My stomach churned. If she'd been there, the whole thing would have been buried right there. My mother didn't want a scandal. She wanted peace and quiet, even if the price was my skin. "I can talk to myself. I'm big enough." She hesitated, but in the end, she agreed. She made an appointment for the next day, the deposition. I left school on shaky legs, but with a plan in my head. That night, I pretended to be ill. I locked myself in my room, checked every copy, every note. I wrote everything down again, in more detail. Name, date, place, how he came in, what he said, where he touched, where he left his mark. Not with ugly words, but with truth. The truth that nobody wanted to face. The next day, I arrived at the police station with sweaty hands. I was greeted by a new police officer who didn't know my family. Maybe that's why he listened to me. He let me talk. He let the silence ache between one sentence and the next. He didn't rush me. He just listened. When I handed over the papers, he picked them up as if he were holding dynamite. "Do you realize what this means, Margaret?" I nodded. "Yes, I do. And if I disappear, the culprit has a name." I left with a tired soul, but with a feeling I'd never felt before, dignity. But he still hadn't backed down. That same evening, a letter arrived at my house. No sender, just my name on the front. My mother, suspicious, handed it to me with a frown. I opened it right then and there. It was just one sheet of paper, a sentence written in a man's handwriting. "You pulled the rope. Now hold the noose." I showed it to my mother. For the first time, she paled. "Was that him?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just went to my room and started packing my suitcase. She followed. "Where are you going?" "Where he can't reach me." She sat on the edge of the bed. Her eyes were deep. For the first time, tears. "I should have protected you." It was the only sincere sentence to come out of her mouth in years. But it was too late. The next day, they took me to a temporary shelter, a small but safe place. There, I told them everything again. I videotaped it. I signed a paper. They examined me. They listened to me. They didn't call me a liar or exaggerated. Little by little, his name began to appear in different whispers. People in town began to remember old cases of other quiet girls, of employees who disappeared, rumors that were never taken seriously. His shield began to crack. Then a local reporter published an anonymous story. All it said was, "The mayor's granddaughter is speaking out, and the city needs to listen." It didn't mention any names, but anyone who read it knew. It was the first public spark. And he couldn't stand it. He appeared on TV a few days later saying that families need to unite, that there are forces out to destroy reputations, that his heart was bleeding with so much slander. But in his eyes, I saw fear. And if there's one thing these men don't know how to deal with, it's the truth when it stops whispering and starts shouting. The story ran on a Sunday morning. Front page of the local newspaper. Large print, bold color, no direct name, but all the clues for anyone who wanted to join the dots. Granddaughter's accusations rock traditional public figure. That alone was enough to rock the boat. That same day, the city changed. People who used to smile at me in the street now turned their faces away. The women in the church started whispering louder, the kind they want you to hear. One of them saw me on the sidewalk and crossed her arms, saying firmly, "How ugly to make up family stuff like that." At the bakery, the owner pretended not to see me. At the grocery store, my mother was ignored at the checkout. It wasn't just shame, it was a boycott, as if we were a plague. But on the other side, something different also started. A girl I barely knew from school sent me a note, handwritten, with shaky handwriting. "Thanks for talking." I was almost next. I held it in my hand for hours. Then others came. Whispered words, notes left in books, looks that said more than any words. There were others like me. There were a lot of silent people. Meanwhile, he was at war. Not with me, with the city, with the image. He started appearing in every corner, church, radio program, newspaper interview, always with the same speech. Good man, wronged. Victim of slander. "They're trying to destroy my career," he said, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to look after my granddaughter, but sometimes..." Affection is misinterpreted. The crowd cried. They applauded. There were still those who saw him as a martyr. What about me? I saw it all from afar, locked in a shelter with other girls, each with their story cut short by the same kind of hand. We were afraid, yes, but we also began to build something there. Strength. One day I received an unexpected invitation. The local TV channel wanted to record an interview, without showing my face, without saying my name, just my voice, my version. I thought about it for hours. I shuddered at the thought. But I accepted, not for me, for the others who were no longer alive, for those who were still trapped. In the recording, my voice faltered at first. Then it came out. I talked about the notebook, about the trip, the threat, the loneliness. I spoke without flowers, without drama, just the truth. The day it aired, my house almost collapsed. The church issued a note of repudiation. Old friends of the family turned up outside the town hall with placards supporting him. "Mayor Charles is innocent. Ungrateful granddaughter. This is a political frame-up." But something began to crack. A gentleman, known for being tough, went to the newspaper. He said he had seen things. At the time, he thought it was childish nonsense. But now he remembered glances, disappearances, and marks. Another woman, with grown-up children, wrote a letter. She said she was also her granddaughter, that she also pretended to sleep, who was also silenced. The weight of his wall began to crack. But it wasn't all victory. My mother came to me. She came to the shelter. She was thin, haggard, as old as ever. "Why did you do this to us?" I looked at her as if for the first time. "I did it for me. You're the one who chose not to see it." She cried, but she didn't hug me. "You ended everything known by the..." He ended it. She got up. She left without looking back. I sat there, my heart mixed with relief and loss, because even after everything, she still preferred the lie, but I didn't back down. And then came the day that everything turned around. A warrant, a bailiff, a formal investigation, his name on people's lips, but now for another reason. Accused, indicted. The town that once revered him now whispered suspiciously. He tried to escape. He lied, screamed, cried. He said it was a setup, that I was unbalanced, that it was teenage stuff. But the more he talked, the more the mask fell away. A reporter gained access to the notebook, a copy. He published excerpts. The sentences that I used to read only in secret were now on the street, on social media, on the benches in the square. He was removed. He had to leave the mayor's office. He still tried to appeal, but it was no use. The voices began to add up, and even though many people still frowned at me, others began to see, to understand. It took longer than it should have, but one day it fell. The image, which was made of marble, began to crumble in his own hands. He tried to deny it, then he tried to justify it, then he kept quiet. Because when the dirt rises and the truth comes out, there's no amount of pretty talk that can hold it back. The prosecutor's office opened the case. Several witnesses came forward, some with faces, others with shaky voices behind closed doors, but enough to build a narrative, one that was no longer mine alone. He was formally charged. He lost his political rights, his mandate, his endorsements. Even the church, the one that always kissed his hand on Sunday, issued a statement saying that crimes need to be rigorously investigated. But justice, my dear, Justice is never complete. He didn't stay in jail. Age, they said, his services to the community, influence. He got house arrest. He stayed in the same house where it all began. He just wasn't in charge anymore. My mother, she stayed by his side, taking care of him, serving him coffee, closing the curtains, pretending that time heals what is hidden. She never asked for my forgiveness. She hasn't even looked me in the eye since the day of the hearing. I moved on. I lived in a temporary home for a while. Then I went to another city. I finished school. I got a scholarship at a community college. I became a teacher, one of those who looks at each student with attentive eyes, because I know that silence screams louder than any words. I never went back to Wheeling to live. I visit sometimes, discreetly. I pass in front of the old city hall. That building now has a different name on its sign. But in my mind, the smell, the forced smiles, the crossed eyes are still there. My grandfather died at the age of 83, sleeping, without pain. The newspaper published a note with a photo. They called him a strong man with a controversial past, but loved by many. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't bring a flower. I didn't pray for a soul. But that night, I slept like I'd never slept before. For the first time in decades, my bed didn't hurt. You know, my dear, people like him leave a trail. But people like me learn to walk on the trail without bleeding so much. I've learned to laugh again, to trust good people, to love, even with the scars, reminding me that not every hug is shelter. Today, at 81, I talk about it without trembling, because telling no longer breaks me. It rebuilds me. And if you've made it this far with me, if you've listened to every part of this story as if you were listening to an old woman talking quietly, then you've already done more for me than many people who have spent their lives by my side. But listen to me now if you feel that something is wrong, that someone is surrounding you with false praise, forced affection, or a threat disguised as love. Scream. Scream as loud as you can, even if only you can hear, because sometimes the beginning of freedom is just the courage to say, I know what you did. If this story has moved you, leave a like. Write to me from where you're listening. My chest is light today, but it was hard to get here. Thank you for walking with me to the end.